Hello there, welcome to the Saroy channel and welcome to my Omnibus series. I've got so many of these omnibuses that are going to come out so that you'll be able to listen to an hour's worth of stories, which I know you're going to love. You know, the thing is that telling stories is such a fine art, and it's something that was practiced hundreds of years ago when people didn't have the technology that we have today. And everyone would gather around the fire and listen to a wonderful story. And also, what is so wonderful about a story is that personally, I think it is the best way to go to sleep. Every night when I go to bed, I always listen to stories. And that's something that parents used to do with their children. It's something that they still do with their children. There's nothing better than a good story. And so I hope you're going to enjoy this series. And before we start, I just want to say, do subscribe to my channel because you don't want to miss out on anything. Because I'm in for the long haul and I want to make sure that you get the most stunning stories to go to bed with at night or to listen to when you want to be one of those people sitting beside the fire and listening. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and let's get started. I hope you're going to enjoy the omnibus.
Dear Sarah, and all your lovely listeners, Mrs. Eartha Mackerson twiddled her fingers rather nervously as she glanced out of the large window overlooking the driveway and the viridescent green grass of the front yard, for she knew in 5 minutes' time she'd be interviewing a young lady called Bertha Ferris, and then there would be others to come, as she worked her way through the long laundry list of names that she really didn't want to get through, even though she was left with no choice on the matter but to do this. These were the names of many eager applicants recommended by the agency that had applied for the nanny position on offer. How do I know if I've chosen the right person, she thought to herself, that I can be sure will meet with my exacting standards? What if I've sent someone away that would be perfect for the job, that I failed to see was absolutely right for the position? What if I get it so horribly wrong? The agency can offer me a smidgen of salient advice, of course, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to me making the final choice, and I better get this right. She wondered privately in her heart if anyone would be good enough for one of the most important jobs in the entire world, and she seriously doubted it. She drew in a deep sigh that was so heavy, even her little girl Christy looked up from the Lego blocks she was playing with on the living room floor with her brother, and asked, "Is everything all right, Mummy? Your face looks a bit sad. Are you sad, Mummy?" Eartha shook her head. "Don't you worry about me, love. Of course Mummy's not sad. I'm just thinking, that's all. What are you building over there? That looks very interesting, Christy." "We're building the tallest building in the entire world with these blocks," said her son Benjamin very proudly. "It's a skyscraper." Eartha smiled at her son adoringly, admiring his cherub-like face with the dimples on both sides of his cheeks, along with his wide, earnest eyes. It was hard for her to restrain herself from wanting to hug him, but he was so absorbed in his building project she thought better of it. She watched as Benjamin eagerly laid the Lego blocks on top of each other. The children were so precious to her, and Eartha Mackerson loved the bones of them. They had become her entire life, along with Alice the white cat, that was lying on the sofa watching the kids attentively, with wide yellow eyes, as if rather curious as to what they were building, and probably wondering if she should jump down from the sofa and send all the Lego blocks flying all over the place, causing major pandemonium. And for some unearthly paradoxical reason, she seemed to love causing chaos in her wake and interfering in the kids' games at any given opportunity. It would seem an unfathomable heaviness suddenly seized Eartha's chest. Indeed, it was so compelling, it almost took her aback. Her heart juddered, and she wondered if she was having a panic attack of sorts. She drew in a deep breath to calm down her nerves, as a ripple of hysteria seemed to ascend in her heart like a large tidal wave. For a moment she felt as if she was about to pass out on the spot, but luckily the momentum seemed to suddenly slow down, and thankfully she gained her composure again. Where had this disturbing uneasiness come from, she wondered. Only a moment ago she had felt so upbeat, so positive about the future, that seemed so promising. But now a sense of dread, that was so nauseating, trickled into every cell of her body, as if something within her was suddenly sounding a silent alarm that was telling her to pay close attention. She grimaced inwardly. She couldn't allow any doubts to confiscate her well-thought-out plans. Granted, she absolutely loathed doing what she was about to do, but it needed to be done. The day ahead loomed before her, like an uncharted, unscripted page in a child's exercise book that had not been written on yet. She pondered what the day would bring for her, and whether the outcome would be favourably positive. Or would she see her dreams being slashed so abruptly, so violently, like the steak under a butcher's knife? Please God, she prayed inwardly, let me get the right person for this job. It's crucial I get this right. 2 lives depend on my intuition, discernment, and wisdom. She wondered if other mothers felt as apprehensive as she did about making decisions like this, when choosing someone to take care of their kids. Or was she alone in being so alarmist about something that some might say was no big deal at all? But to Eartha Mackison, any decision that concerned her own children was a very big deal. She had spoken to her best friend Rona on her cell, only 5 minutes earlier, about the matter. "I just can't do this, Rona," she said, knowing that Rona was the one person in the entire world that she could confide in. Who else was there now that her husband was dead? And talking to her parents about such concerns would make her mother become as paranoid as she was, as they were so startlingly alike. The last time she had confided in her mother about something that had worried her greatly, her mother had practically moved in with her the following morning and taken over the entire household. Eartha knew her mother would willingly look after the children, but she wanted her parents to enjoy their retirement years without being thrust with further responsibilities, like caring for their grandchildren, while she was working. She simply couldn't do that to them. After Nate had fortuitously died, Eartha's mother had devotedly spent her time shopping for Eartha, cooking, looking after the grandkids' every need, and she'd done so much already as far as Eartha was concerned. That selfless woman had done more than enough for her, and Eartha knew it was up to her to manage the affairs of her life as efficiently as she possibly could, and not to be dependent on her parents to bail her out of any difficulties. "I just can't do it," she repeated to Rona. "Maybe I should give up before I even get started. Something doesn't feel right about this, Rona. This whole wretched nanny project is really getting me down. I'm seriously beginning to have second thoughts about it. A moment ago I had a panic attack, would you believe? Well, at least I think it was a panic attack." "Where are you phoning me from?" came Rona's troubled voice. "You seem rather far away." "Sorry, it must be the poor reception. It's probably not a good line, I'm afraid. If you must know, I'm speaking to you from the kitchen at home. The kids are playing with Lego blocks in the lounge. Building, I believe, the tallest skyscraper in the world. So I'm told, by Benjamin, that is." She giggled for a moment. "They're not going to succeed in their goals, of course. I've got a funny feeling Alice, our white cat, is going to sabotage their great efforts and bring that entire building of Lego blocks crashing down quite abruptly by jumping from the sofa onto the Lego blocks. She's done it before. She seems to get a kick out of causing chaos. It's all a big game to her, I suspect. Honestly, that cat is absolutely incorrigible, but we can't help ourselves loving the monster to death. Anyway, I'm talking to you here as I just don't want the children to hear me discuss something that concerns them. They don't even know I'm thinking of employing a nanny, and I'm not sure how they're going to react when I tell them that somebody else will be supervising their needs during the day." She heard Rona sighing with exasperation in the background, amidst the sounds of New York traffic, along with the occasional bellow, probably from a taxi horn. There was nothing quiet about the thriving metropolis of New York, and Eartha knew it all too well, as she'd recently lived in Manhattan herself, and had only just moved to the countryside, but still resided in New York State. This was a choice she certainly hoped would be a wise one. She'd been looking forward to spending a peaceful life, away from the rat race of the city, and she hoped she'd find it here, close to a small rural town with only 5,000 residents, that she thought would be perfect for herself and her kids. She realized that Rona was probably walking down a busy street of the bustling metropolis with her cell phone stuck to her ear as they talked together. She was likely making her way to the solicitor's office, Borkman's Associates, where she worked as a receptionist, among other things. Rona described herself as a general dog's body. She said her boss, Mr. Borkman, even got her to buy his wife's birthday presents for him, which came as a bit of a shocker, but apparently the man had no imagination whatsoever, and Rona was the one who came up with the innovative suggestions for all his wife's presents, and so much more, of course. "Honestly, listen to yourself, Eartha," Rona chastised. "I predicted you'd react like this. You have the quintessential opportunity that many would dream of. Over the last year you've been through hell and back, Eartha. Of course I recognise that. But you've got through the dark tunnel now, and I know you don't believe it, but there really is a light at the other end, and you need to open your eyes to see it. Because believe it or not, girl, your future's going to be a bright one." "I don't think I see any bright light. All I'm seeing is a whole lot of what-ifs. My mind is completely bogged down with them. What if the nanny is completely weird?" "What's wrong with weird? There are things worse than hiring a weird, somewhat eccentric nanny. That doesn't matter a jot. What matters is hiring someone you can trust with your children. Let's just say if Nate were alive, he'd be encouraging you to do this for yourself. You've always wanted to work from home, Eartha. You've wanted to run your own pottery studio since you were knee-high to a grasshopper. Now you've got the financial freedom to do so. And now you can put your energy into this project. You know what I say, and that is go for it, girl. What have you got to lose? Absolutely nothing. That's the way I see it anyway. What about my children, Rona? I can't stop thinking about them. I feel so dreadfully self-centred and so selfish doing this for myself. Their needs are so much more important than my own. Quit saying you're being selfish, Eartha. If you want my opinion, I seriously think you'll even be a better mother to your children, because you'll be a happier person, and children are receptive to that. They pick up on the moods of their parents, and I would put money on your kids wanting a happier mother every single time." "Funny you should say that. Only a moment ago Christy was asking me if I was sad. She could see how worried I was about something, but I didn't tell her, of course, what it was. But that daughter of mine is as sharp as a tack." "What did I tell you? Kids are not stupid, Eartha. They pick up on things very quickly. A happy mother is what every child wants. Let's just say looking after kids day in and day out can be taxing at the very best of times. And without your Nate being on the scene anymore to lend a helping hand, things can become overwhelming and extremely tough. You need all the help you can get. It's no fun being a single mother, believe me. My sister Lana can testify to that. I'm just scared, Rona, about trusting some random stranger with my children that I know absolutely nothing about, apart from what the agency tells me. Looking after kids is a big, big responsibility, and the way I see it, I don't think anyone will ever be good enough for mine. I also feel so dreadfully guilty about not doing my mothering job full time and relying on somebody else to do it for me. Oh, my God, I can't believe this. You're getting cold feet, aren't you, Eartha? Please don't get cold feet. I think I am getting cold feet, Rona. I do hate to admit it, but I really do. I think it's because I feel as if I'm trampling on unfamiliar territory that I'm not well acquainted with, and I'm beginning to rather feel like an imposter in my own life. Oh, don't feel guilty, for goodness sake, Eartha. You didn't move all the way to the country 5 months ago to start backtracking now, did you? I mean, it's not as if you're even leaving your property, is it? You're on the property all day in a separate building that you renovated yourself into a pottery studio. When you take breaks from working in your studio, you can always check on the children throughout the day, as often as you like for that matter. Think about it. Some single parents don't have the luxury. Well, I suppose you are right about that. Of course I'm right about it. Think about it. These people dutifully toddle off to their jobs in the big city, and they come back in the early evening, don't they? Feeling exhausted and frayed after a day spent at work. And then they don't even really get to see their kids, because by then their kids are going to bed. Think about it. With you working in your brand new pottery studio, creating some of your magnificent masterpieces, which I'm certain you're going to produce, as I've got so much faith in you, my girl, and all that talent that you've been hiding under a bushel for far too long, you can take as many breaks as you like. And in those quintessential moments, not only will you be able to check on the nanny to see if she's doing her job adequately, but you can also interact with your children whenever you so wish. You are the one that gets to call all the shots. It's a win-win situation as far as I'm concerned, Eartha. Well, I suppose you're right about that. Of course I'm right, Eartha. You're one of the lucky ones. You need to see it that way. I'm sure there are many single mothers that would dream to be in your privileged position, and on top of it have the opportunity to pursue their dreams at the same time. Your barn has been converted into the most magnificent pottery studio I have ever seen, with an incredible kiln. Do you have any idea how many people are currently working in jobs they abhor, only to be able to afford groceries to put food on the table? It's really tough out there. You, my girl, enviably get to do something you really love. It doesn't get better than that, does it? And you can make a good business out of this pottery, because people adore your work. That tea set you made for me years ago. Everybody asks me where I got it from, because they want to buy one exactly the same. You need to make Nate's life insurance money you received count for something, so that something good may be fruited from this tragedy. I know you're right, Rona. Why do you think I called you? I knew you would speak some common sense to me. But why am I not feeling good about any of this? Why do I have this dreadful feeling? The best word to describe it is a nagging sense of foreboding. Why do I feel like this? Do you think I'm possibly having a premonition? Oh, don't be ridiculous. Do you really want to go there? You're not having a premonition, Eartha, about something bad happening if you hire a nanny. It's natural to feel the way you do. You yourself say you're navigating your life on uncharted territory. It's a new beginning for you, isn't it? Change is terrifying for all of us. You're a great Mother Eartha, you really are. You always have been. You have always put Chrissy and Benjamin first over and above yourself. You gave up your dream to own your own pottery studio and to become a potter, to take care of your children, to be a full-time mother for them, simply because you couldn't afford to pay for a nanny or to have your own studio. But now you can afford a nanny and you have your own pottery studio. So it's a game changer for you, is it not? Things have changed exponentially in more ways than you ever imagined possible. Yes, it's a tragedy that the financial freedom you always longed for only came to you after Nate's tragic death. But he would be the first to tell you to do this, to go for it. I remember very clearly Nate telling me how he longed to set you up in your own pottery studio so you could pursue your dreams. He told me that hundreds of times over. But sadly at the time you didn't have money. So at least something good came out of this dreadful calamity. No money can ever replace Nate. I'd rather be as poor as a church mouse, Rona, and live on baked beans every day of my life than be without him. I miss him so terribly. A day doesn't go by without me grieving his loss, even after all this time. Of course you feel that way, Eartha. But you know, no matter how long you wish for the chapter in the book to be written all over again, it's already complete and published, if you get my drift. There's no going back now. You can't undo the past, can you? I know you're right, but sometimes I just can't help being lugubriously sorrowful, overwrought with irrational anxieties. And recently they appear to be getting worse. I worry incessantly about this wretched nanny business. I guess I've seen so many movies about nannies doing dreadful things to people's children. So naturally I fear the worst. I can't help myself on that. Well, anyone in your position would feel exactly the same. Children are a big responsibility, Eartha. Everybody knows that. But you've been very brave. I take my hat off to you. how you've handled everything so stoically since Nate's death. You've been a trooper, you really have. And I don't say that lightly. You deserve some good fortune for a change in your life, Eartha. That's all I'm saying. Now quit feeling sorry for yourself, will you? And go and interview those nannies. I promise you the future is not as dauntingly intimidating as you believe it to be. Grab the bull by the horns, for goodness sake, and go for it, girl. You'll be so glad you did. But what if I don't find anyone suitable, Rona? If you don't like the nannies you see today, there is no harm done. You can do this all over again until someone that you meet ticks the right boxes for you. Maybe you could use another agency. Don't forget, Eartha, these professional nanny agencies have vetted the nannies before you even get to interview them. So no doubt they've checked references and so forth. They've done all the hard graft for you. You only have to pick someone you believe will be good with your children and right for the job. It's not rocket science. How hard can it be? Are you kidding me? It's the hardest decision I've ever made in my entire life. These are my children, Rona. If I get this horribly wrong, I will never be able to forgive myself. Sometimes the heart doesn't match the outer veneer. You know that as well as I do. How often have you met someone that on the surface looks to be a very nice, amenable person, and then you realize they're anything but? Look, Eartha, I think you've got great judgment. I mean, you picked Nate out, didn't you? And he was one hell of a husband. So I do think you're extremely discerning. You've always been that way inclined, and enviably so, if I might say. Let's just say out of the two of us, I've been the one that's always picked out the dodgy boyfriends who incessantly cheated on me, messed me around the whole time. Since I've known you, every boyfriend you've had, Eartha, was faithful, reliable, and noble. Then the cherry on the cake was when you married one of the most unbelievably reliable men I've ever met, and that was Nate. I don't think you've ever been cheated on a day in your life, Eartha. You've instinctively always picked out good, solid men. It probably goes the same with any nanny you choose to employ. Look at me. I, on the other hand, can count on my hand how many times my heart has been broken into hundreds of tiny pieces due to my reckless ability to fall for losers. I'm like that kid that went into the candy store, intending to choose the sweet sweets, and ended up with all the sour ones. Don't knock the sour sweets, Rona. I like sour sweets. They can taste pretty good. Eartha chuckled. You are funny, Rona, dear. Don't knock sour sweets. They can taste pretty good, you know. Point taken, Eartha, but I've never been partial to sour sweets myself. But I always seem to pick them out for some reason. For the record, think of the times you've helped me overcome the shipwrecks of my own life, one after another. You've helped me through so many tumultuous times, Eartha, and I truly appreciate it. I really do. I hope you know that. Well, of course I know that, Rona. But it works both ways, does it not? You've always been there for me, and you would have done the same for me if I was falling apart at the seams. I might remind you, over this last year, after Nate died, you've always been there for me, Rona, especially when I've been falling apart at the seams. Like over the last year, since Nate died, you've been there for me every single step of the way, and without you, I honestly know, without a second shadow of a doubt, that I would have quite literally fallen apart. You encouraged me to move away from New York and buy this idyllic treasure of a red brick Georgian house in the countryside, with its exquisite prepossessing views and wood groves of trees. It is so wonderful, let me tell you, to wake up every morning and to breathe in the crisp air, and to see a couple of deer eating the apples under the tree. You were the one that gave me this push that I so badly needed. So because of you, I'm here now. It's a two-way streak, is it not? Friends helping each other out, I mean, and confiding in each other all the time. You're like a sister to me, Rona. You are the sister I never had. You mean the world to me. I can talk to you about absolutely anything. Rona paused for a brief moment, and then said rather gingerly in a muted whisper, I'm just hoping that this second marriage of mine is not going to fail. If the truth be told, I don't actually hold up much hope for things improving. Things were going so well between me and Nick over the last couple of years or so. But over the last 3 weeks, something's really off. Nick's been so evasive, so non-committal, and not terribly affectionate towards me. In truth, I can't remember the last time he actually told me he loved me. He used to say it all the time. Don't you think that's strange?
What do you mean? What are you talking about, Rona? I can't believe you are saying all this now. You told me very specifically when you married Nick that you trusted him implicitly. You knew he was not like all the other men that had messed you around over the years, who had let you down by being unfaithful. As for telling you he loves you all the time, men don't always think they need to tell you they love you. They assume you already know that, or they wouldn't otherwise be with you. As for being evasive, you're probably reading too much into it. Maybe Nick has been extremely busy of late. Perhaps he's rather distracted with projects at work that are consuming his undivided focus. It happens a lot. It happened to me occasionally. When Nate got busy, there were times we became like passing ships in the night. But we always knew one thing, and that was that we loved each other. It would seem to me, Rona, you're expressing as much doubt in your relationship with Nick, who you've only been married to for 2 years, I might remind you, as I am about hiring a nanny.
Oh, don't worry about me, came Rona's voice, feigning a counterfeit confidence that she obviously did not feel. You're right. It's not a train wreck that Nick doesn't keep telling me he loves me. But it would be nice if he did. I'm probably worried about being cheated on again for nothing. I just can't shake off the feeling that Nick is doing the dirty on me. Maybe I feel this way because I've never been lucky in love, have I? And after 2 years of being happily married to Nick, I'm already looking for cracks in the cement to show. If my past relationships had not been so tumultuous, I wouldn't feel like this, I suspect.
Why are you talking like this, Rona? It's unlike you to sound so down in the dumps about your relationship with Nick. Everything was going so well with him. It makes me wonder if there's something in the water, perhaps. I'm sure Nick is not cheating on you. Where on earth did you get such a weird, bizarre idea from?
I don't know, Eartha. I don't know how to explain it to you. It's just a gut feeling, that's all. I've got no proof, of course. I mean, I've looked through all his jacket pockets for receipts from restaurants that he's never taken me to. I've looked for marks on his collar, lipstick marks, and smelt for woman's perfume that might be lingering on his clothes. I've literally been through all his sports things, looking for clues. I've scanned his cell phone for suspicious numbers and messages. When he wasn't looking, that is. But I've found no incriminating evidence at all to suggest that my hunch is right. I feel as if I'm going mad, or as if I'm losing my mind.
I know exactly what this is all about, said Eartha assertively, trying her best to encourage Rona. You've had so much bad luck in relationships, haven't you, Rona, from the past? So it's hardly surprising you're insecure. And afraid that what happened to all your other relationships will invariably repeat itself again, rather like Groundhog Day. You're allowed to have doubts, you know. We all do. I'm sure in your case you've got nothing to worry about at all. Nick really loves you, Rona. I saw the way he stared at you so wondrously on your wedding day. He looked like the cat that had got all the cream. He was deliriously happy, and so were you, I might add. My guess is Nick knows he's hit the jackpot in marrying you. You're the whole package, Rona. You need to realize it, and I mean every word of it. You're great-looking, if at all a bit unconventional and rather bohemian. You're fun to be around, clever, intelligent, and terribly funny. If Nick did the dirty on you, he'd not only be an absolute fool, but he'd need his head examining, wouldn't he? Or possibly a brain transplant, so to speak.
You think so? Said Rona. Oh, I do hope you're right, Eartha. Why am I thinking so negatively about my marriage all of a sudden? Why am I suspicious all the time? You're right, it's absolutely ridiculous of me. We were so happy together, Nick and I, but it's just...
There you go again, said Eartha, interjecting quickly, to avert her friend from expressing even more doubts. You're worrying about absolutely everything and nothing, Rona, at the very same time. You and me, we're a fine pair, are we not? We should start up our own business and call it Worry Anonymous or something like that. For people like you and me that seem to have an addiction to worrying all the time. We're a right pair, the both of us. Incorrigible is what my father would call it. You're funny, Eartha. Come to think of it, why isn't there a support group for people who worry too much? There should be, you know. I would join it myself for sure. Maybe then I'd be able to get a sense of perspective about things. Getting back to your concerns about this nanny business. What about it, Rona? You want me to tell you what I'm really thinking about it all? But of course I do, Rona. That is why I phoned you. Because your input is always invaluable, and you know that. Well, hand on heart, I admit there always is a big risk in hiring someone to work for you that you don't actually know. For a start, your kids need to like that person, don't they? The person is invariably going to live with you full time, occupy a bedroom in your home. So they need to fit in with the family dynamics, because personality clashes do and can occur. So it's significantly important you feel comfortable and at ease with this person being around the place. Furthermore, you hope they're reliable, trustworthy and honest. But then again, everything in life requires taking a risk, like I'm doing right now, crossing this road. Anything could happen to me, couldn't it? A car could come out from absolutely nowhere, mow me down in a second. But one way or another, I still have to cross this road to get to work, don't I? In the same breath, you have to hire a nanny to start your own business. You don't have a choice in the matter, do you? Unless you decide to remain a full-time stay-at-home mother, looking after the kids, which you don't want to do you? Point taken. Except I do wish, Rona, you wouldn't talk about cars mowing you down. You've put an unsettling picture in my head that I can't easily erase.
Sorry, I don't suppose that was a good example.
It certainly wasn't, said Eartha. You know me, Rona. I'm squeamish about talking about things or tempting fate, so to speak. I won't even walk under a ladder. That's how dreadfully superstitious I am.
Superstitions are unfounded, said Rona. I've walked under ladders plenty of times. Nothing bad has ever happened to me, unless of course you're talking about my relationships with men. Those, I admit, haven't exactly been lucky, or desperately auspicious. I'd better go, Eartha. I'm just approaching the glass doors of my office building, and it looks as if I've got here in the nick of time. The sky is ominously dark, and it looks as if it's going to come down in buckets in any second now. In fact, a couple of drops of rain have already brushed my nose.
Well, if you must know, it's pouring with rain here, admitted Eartha. And it doesn't look like it's going to stop in a hurry either. So you better get indoors quickly.
Well, then, my prognosis of rain was right on the money, it seems. I'll speak to you later. My fingers will be crossed for you, Eartha, hoping you find the absolute perfect nanny for the job. Good luck. Not that I think you're going to need it.
Thank you, Rona. It's very kind of you to say. And good luck is something I seriously do need, said Eartha Mackison, ending her call somewhat abruptly.
Rona had been her very best friend growing up. She had lived in the brownstone apartment next door to her own parents, and the two children had become inseparable over the years. Rona was now the godmother of both of Eartha's two children. It had been a shock to hear her expressing so much uncertainty about her current marriage to Nick. Eartha had never heard until now her best friend expressing such sceptical doubts in regards to her current husband Nick of 2 years. And such unsettling revelations from her best friend did not exactly sit well with Eartha. It felt rather too familiar for her, rather like a déjà vu experience from the past, when Rona had expressed similar doubts about previous boyfriends she had been dating, and her gut instincts had always turned out to be correct. Rona might be many things, but stupid she most certainly was not. If she emphatically believed Nick might be cheating on her, then maybe he was. Eartha really did not want to entertain such beleaguered thoughts for her very best friend's sake. When a woman starts to feel this way, it usually means something is up. In Eartha's opinion, women were naturally instinctive by nature, and could easily sense if their partner was clandestinely hiding something from them. One thing Eartha had never told her friend Rona was that her late husband Nate, who had been part of a highly skilled police squad team that had brought down dangerous criminals for a living when he was alive, had expressed grave misgivings about Rona's husband Nick. Nate had always been a remarkably good judge of character. He had told Eartha that in no uncertain terms he had extreme reservations in regard to Rona's second choice of husband, and those reservations were very pronounced.
I know you're not going to like me saying this, Eartha, but what the hell, I'm going to tell you anyway, because we don't have any secrets between us. If you must know, I don't like Rona's second husband any more than I liked the first. Actually, if the truth be told, I think her second husband is far worse than her first husband was. If you had a cherry tree growing in the garden, let's just say Rona would end up picking off all the rotten fruit from it, avoiding the good fruit. Some women simply can't help themselves, can they? They have an innate ability to pick out men that treat them like the turd on their shoes. And I'm afraid Rona is like that.
His name is Nick, Nate, Eartha had scolded. In case you've forgotten. Anyway, what is wrong with him? He seems like an exceptionally good man to me. And besides, anyone can see he completely idolizes Rona. I think he's very good for her, if you must know. If the truth be told, I've never seen Rona more happy. Don't ruin it for her by thinking such outrageously negative thoughts about a man that you barely know anything about.
If you must know, sweetheart, I think he's shifty. You mark my words, that wily, unscrupulous man is going to do the dirty on her. Maybe not now, but certainly when he gets bored of Rona, once the honeymoon period is over and life becomes routinely humdrum. I just know the sort. Don't bite my head off on this, love. I know it's not what you want to hear, but I can feel it in my gut like an itch I want to scratch. He's a smooth talker, devious, underhanded, Janus-faced and shady. On the surface he appears utterly charming. That's why he fools everyone he meets. But there's something insidiously calculating about him. I just don't like him. It's a feeling I cannot shake off. I didn't make a study of human behavior and body language for nothing. I've always been able to pick out the bad fruit when I see it, and you know it as well as I do.
Eartha had looked at her husband incredulously. Why are you saying all this, Nate? She said, her face draining of all its colour. I can't believe you're expressing all this doubt about Nick. Let me tell you, of all the men that Rona has been with over the years, I can honestly say this is the first time that she's found someone that is steadfastly loyal, solid and dependably reliable. Someone who I know won't let her down. I think, despite your being so good at judging people by their character, I think this time you've got Nick horribly wrong.
I wouldn't be so sure of that, Nate had said gingerly. I, for one, hope I'm wrong on this. I really do. But experience leads me to believe that Nick is not as he first appears. I know how much you love your best friend Rona, but you know how notorious she is for picking out the worst men, and I don't think she's changed the habits of a lifetime in that regard. I know she's like the sister you never had, and I completely understand you don't want me to speak unkindly of her new husband, but I want you to know that maybe not everything will remain rosy in the garden once the gloss has worn off. That's all I'm saying. Don't say you weren't warned about this.
Eartha had felt a rather uncomfortable prickle of indignance towards her husband Nate for expressing his dubious hesitancy towards Nick's character, but she did know in his job he could pick out a criminal out of a group of people without much difficulty. He knew exactly what to look out for, so for him to say this about Rona's Nick had been very disconcerting, to say the least. At one point in Nate's career, he had worked in airport security and easily pulled over the right people that were carrying drugs on their person. He had been discerning in picking them out, with an effortless, flawless ease, rather like a cadaver dog can sniff out a dead corpse. He had an esteemed reputation for being remarkably savvy. Some people at the airport were known to call Nate the big dog, and that was meant as a big compliment because he was extremely astute. Nate had studied body language, and he could easily see what passengers after a flight were sweating profusely and trying to conceal an inward trepidation as they carried their luggage through customs, holding their breaths as they prayed they would not be pulled over. But Nick had singled them out every single time. When he'd pulled them to one side and inspected their luggage, Nick had discovered a treasure trove of trophies, like drugs secretly hidden in obscure places, like in statues of the Eiffel Tower, in deodorant sticks, shampoo bottles, hidden pockets or compartments in suitcases, in clothes, in wash bags, and the list goes on. Eartha tried not to reflect on her late husband's rather sombre words that came back to haunt her in a memory flash. She wanted more than ever to believe Rona had finally met someone who would treat her right, the love of her life, but with her friend light-heartedly suddenly expressing her entangled misgivings about Nick, it had all sent a pretentious, ominous feeling into Eartha's heart. But she shook it off, telling herself she was just being silly. She was sure that her best friend had met a man of extreme substance that would never ever let Rona down. And if Nate had been wrong about anything in his lifetime, please God, let it be this. As Eartha vaguely stared out of the window, the gloomy, inauspicious weather did not bring her much encouragement, for the dogmatic rain persisted, thrashing through the heavens as if there was no end in sight. The inauspicious clouds looked dark and menacing, and raindrops trickled down the window pane, rather reminding Eartha of tears. In the distance she could hear the faint clashing boom of thunder. Was the weather an ill omen, she thought? An ill-fated prognostication, perhaps, of what was to come if she were to hire a nanny for her children? Was Nate reaching out to her from the great beyond, telling her not to do this? Don't be silly, Eartha told herself. People do it all the time, didn't they? Trusted perfect strangers to watch over their children. Besides, an agency's reputation would surely be sullied if they recommended someone that was completely incompetent and ill-equipped to look after her children. Eartha began to twiddle the 2 wedding bands together with her fingers that she and her husband had always worn. She had always wanted to continue wearing her wedding band, even after Nate's fortuitous death, but had decided instead of wearing it on her finger, she'd wear both rings around her neck. She had got the chain especially made by a local jeweller's for the purpose, and it really did look good around her neck. For some reason, wearing this chain every day close to her chest seemed to anchor her to her life, almost as if Nate himself was propping her up. There were times she could feel him around her, although she believed that was wishful thinking on her part. If you wanted to believe something strongly enough, you could make it true for yourself. And for her, rubbing the 2 rings together was almost certainly a self-soothing gesture that brought her much comfort in moments when her burdened heart became heavy, and there had been many of those. Her father had told her that life was never easy, but who knew it could be this hard? She couldn't help but think that. It was a pity when you died that you didn't get a medal or a gold star for making it through the ups and downs of this unpredictable life, which is like a journey on a train that is going to take you places you never dreamed of, some good, some not so good, and some really bad. She wouldn't have wished what she'd been through over the last year on her worst enemy, and that was certain. In truth, there had been many dark days after Nate's tragic demise, too many to count, and getting out of bed had been a laborious struggle. Sometimes she clandestinely wished that she had also died along with her husband, so that she could run away from the crippling pain that had held her to ransom for so long, under its cruel vice and formidable grip. How she wished with all her heart that the grief would just go away, melting like butter off a corn cob. But with 2 children to manage and to nurture, who would likely never remember their father, she had known she had a duty of responsibility to take care of both of her children, and this was over and above brooding over her tragic loss. Put simply, she didn't have the luxury to be able to grieve, nor the time. She had to pick up the pieces of her life and just get on with it. If your ship was sinking, you needed to do everything in your power to stay afloat and to hold on for dear life until finally you were rescued. It was called survival. Nate would have wanted nothing less than a bright and rosy future for both of their children, and she wanted that too for them. She couldn't allow the jolting up and down of her personal emotional turbulence to wreak havoc on raising her kids. If she was upset all the time, it would make her children feel vulnerable, fragile, and insecure. She was the one that had to courageously hold the family together, for she needed to be strong. Her parents had reminded her of that. Her father's words still sang their wizened song in her head, over and over again. "Eartha, I know you've lost a very good man, and my heart really bleeds for you, as does your mother's. It isn't fair, but it's the game of life. Life, I'm afraid, isn't always fair. Sometimes you find yourself drawing the short straw. I've experienced that many times in my own life. For the sake of the children, you're going to have to be brave and strong, and I know it's not easy. When I fought in Afghanistan, and one of my fallen comrades was down, what did I do? There was nothing I could do. I continued to fight. We all did. We couldn't allow our emotions to cripple our success. I had to focus on the job at hand and remind myself that there was purpose behind all this madness. When I did return home, of course I experienced post-traumatic stress disorder. So many of us did. As in any war scenario, you see sights you cannot unsee. If you think about it, sometimes we face wars in our own personal lives, like losing a loved one, and that can be quite a battle. You need to be a soldier, my love, for the kids. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? Yes, Dad, of course I do. And you're right, Eartha had said. What you say makes absolute sense. But I'm not sure I'm strong enough, Dad. I'm not like you. I don't know if I can get through this. What are you talking about, Eartha? That's nonsense. You're strong enough. You've always been hardwired to be tough. I've known that about you from the moment you were born. I've seen you growing up as a kid, and how well you always overcame adversity. You remember when your mother's cockatiel Rolf died? Your mother loved that annoying bird, so much so that it would perch on her shoulders all the time, and remain on those shoulders wherever she went, and was always watching me, that bird, like a guard dog overseeing the crown jewels. And in Rolf's eyes, your mother was the crown jewels that needed protecting. That bird never liked me getting anywhere near your mother, and whenever I even leant over to kiss her on the cheek, that bird would scream and squawk blue murder. For some reason, your mother seemed to find it all hilariously funny. I, on the other hand, was a whole lot less amused, for I was sharing my wife with a very jealous, overpossessive male bird, and that was no fun for me. Oh, I do remember that, Dad. That bird, Rolf, did not like you at all. He didn't want to share you with Mum, and made his position very clear. It wasn't difficult to see that when it came to choosing sides, Mum preferred to choose Rolf's side over your own. I'm very well aware of that. But one day, do you remember our ginger cat McGovern? You remember him? Of course I remember McGovern. He was an absolutely amazing ratter. One day McGovern got Rolf the cockatiel between his jaws and killed poor old Rolf. I never heard the end of it. Your mother blamed me for the accident. She was absolutely devastated. I watched you, Eartha. You were 15 years old at the time. Such a self-assured, principled young lady you were. I remember thinking to myself, that's my girl. You know what you did? You probably remember, don't you? No, I don't specifically remember. And I was only 15 at the time. You'd think I'd have a better memory than that. What did I do, Dad? Well, you sat your mother down at the kitchen table. You made her a cup of very sweet tea. And you told her very kindly how Rolf the cockatiel had lived a very good life. And yes, it was desperately sad that McGovern had got him, but these things happened.
You then very gently led your mother by the hand, as if she was a 5-year-old girl, and you were her parent. You took her to the backyard and put poor little Rolf in a shoebox, and with a spade you helped your mother dig a grave for the cockatiel, and then bury him. You brought out the Bible and read some passages, while your mother wept. You then covered the burial spot with flowers from the yard. The following week, with your own savings in your piggy bank, you went and bought your mother another cockatiel, and you also got a collar for McGovern to wear, with a bell on it, so that the incident with the cockatiel never repeated itself again. The problem with that bell was that McGovern became a less efficient ratter after that. Let's just say I knew you'd wanted to buy something very special for yourself with that money. You were saving it up for something. I can't remember what exactly. But you were more sad about your mother's pain in losing Rolf. So you were absolutely determined to make things better for her. So you bought her another bird.
Oh, yes, I did, didn't I? Admitted Bertha.
You were very determined. And in the beginning your mother yelled at you and said, "I don't want another bird. No one could replace Rolf." But later that day your mother was eating her words. She had fallen head over heels in love with the second cockatiel. The irony of ironies is your mother loved the second cockatiel more than Rolf, which is almost impossible to believe, but it was true. She called her new cockatiel Ernie, because she said Ernie reminded her of an old teacher she had at school that she was very fond of. Ernie was even more possessive over your mother, more than Rolf had been. Oh my God, that bird was an absolute nightmare. Pecked at me all the time, squeaked and screamed whenever I was around your mother. Your mother loved every second of it. I remember thinking to myself, why didn't Eartha buy a girl cockatiel for her mother, so I wouldn't have to compete for my wife's affections all the time from a bloody bird? What I'm trying to say, Eartha, love, is that even though what you're going through at this time is grievously uncertain and upsetting, there is always another sunset on the horizon. You can be sure of that, and I speak from experience. But, Dad, did you ever get over the death of your fallen comrades? I never actually asked you that question. Of course you never get over the adversity of war, and the people that you lost. You also think about the people you shot on the enemy side, how their families are coping with the loss of that loved one from their lives. You never ever get over the insanity of war, but you learn to compartmentalize your life in your mind so that you can function as a human being. That's what you need to do with your memories of Nate. It's the only way to navigate your way through the storm. And if anyone can do it, Eartha, it's you. I have faith in you.
Eartha had listened to her father's salient advice. She had wisely hidden her grief from her children, for she didn't want them to see her cry. It had been so hard trying to explain to them that Daddy would never be coming back home again, that he'd gone to heaven and was hanging out with the angels. Her 2 children had been drawing at the time with crayons on big pieces of white drawing paper, when she had told them the terrible truth. It seemed easier to talk to them while they were distracted, by doing something that they loved. At the time, Benjamin had been 3 years old, and Christy 4.5.
What do you mean, Mummy?
Benjamin had asked, looking up at her from his drawing, with a puzzled look on his face.
I mean Daddy has gone to heaven, she said, pointing to the ceiling. He's not coming back home, love. He's never coming home again. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Benjamin continued to draw.
But why is he not coming back, Mummy?
He asked almost nonchalantly.
Doesn't he want to see us again? Why does he want to stay up in the sky all the time?
Christy had surprised Eartha with her matter-of-fact approach to death. She interjected,
Daddy wants to stay in heaven because the angels up there are so nice, and there's chocolate and marshmallow fruit growing on all the trees, like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. Everything tastes so nice in heaven, and everything looks very pretty. You can even drink chocolate from the stream there. Mrs. Phillips at Sunday school says the roads are paved with lots and lots of gold, and there are pearly gates up there.
For a second Christy stopped drawing, held her crayon in her hands, and looked at Eartha reflectively.
Will Daddy come back to visit us, Mummy? She asked. Eartha answered her children rather gingerly. He won't come down to see us in person, if that's what you mean, while he's in heaven drinking chocolate. But he's having a good time there, and there's a very big glass window in heaven, where he can watch us all day long, if he wants to, said Eartha, trying to conceal the raw emotions in her voice, for she didn't want her children to pick up her melancholia. Can Daddy see what I'm drawing now? Asked Christy in delight, glancing up at the ceiling. Is he looking down at me from the window in heaven? She said with a euphoric look on her face. Can he see me now, Mummy? I'm sure he can see you, said Eartha. I'm sure he's watching you right now, even as I speak, from that big window. And he's drinking a big mug of hot chocolate from the stream in heaven. I'm sure he's going to watch you every single day from now on, to make sure you don't get up to any mischief. But I'm never naughty, said Christy. Only the cat is naughty, but me and Benjamin, we're good, aren't we, Benjamin? Benjamin nodded in agreement. Guess what, Mummy? I'm going to draw Daddy an angel, said Christy, beginning to draw with great gusto, as if her life depended on it. I'm going to draw Daddy an angel too, said Benjamin excitedly. But mine is going to be much bigger than Christy's is. My angel is going to be as big as a skyscraper, so it can reach up to heaven. But my angel's going to be bigger than a skyscraper, boasted Christy competitively. It was Benjamin who now looked up at the ceiling and began to wave vigorously. What are you doing, Benjamin? Eartha asked curiously, rather amused by her son's bizarre behaviour. I'm waving at Daddy, of course. For a moment he looked rather concerned. He can see me through the ceiling, can't he, Mummy? It's not blocking the view from heaven, is it? But of course he can see you. He's in heaven, so he can see everything. There are no barriers. For a moment Eartha felt the tears rush into her eyes. I think I need to go to the bathroom, children, for a moment, she said, very suddenly, dashing to the little cloakroom under the stairs, where she took sanctuary on the closed lid of the toilet seat. She stuffed her mouth with toilet paper, so her throbbing, deep guttural cries could not be heard by her children. She certainly did not want her two children to pick up on her grief. She couldn't let them see her like this, with red puffy eyes, looking so downcast and dishevelled. In that quintessential moment, Eartha's wistful memory seemed to shift back to her childhood. For a brief moment, she recalled herself as a 9-year-old girl. Their family dog, Sylvester, had died of old age. It was a sudden heart attack. Eartha had found him curled up in his basket, not moving, when moments before he had simply trotted over to the water bowl to drink some water. At that time they had a Jack Russell Terrier called Magpie, and Eartha had told her mother that she needed to show Magpie that Sylvester was dead, because Magpie needed to know the truth. Eartha had been more than a little bewildered when Magpie had simply sniffed his deceased best friend, lying there unflinching and unmoving in his doggy basket, and then just nonchalantly trotted away, almost as if Sylvester's death was perfectly normal. He'd rushed off to get his ball, in the hope that Eartha would play with him. He had dropped the ball at her feet in expectation. Why isn't Magpie sad, Mum? His best friend Sylvester is dead, she had asked her mother, looking decidedly puzzled. He's not even crying, Mummy. She had expected Magpie to go into a corner looking very, very sad, rather than show an interest in chasing after a ball. Instead, Magpie was in an ebullient good mood, untroubled by the sad fate of his beloved friend. He began to run around the place with his tail wagging furiously, as if it was all water off a duck's back, that his doggy friend had passed away. And Magpie only seemed interested in playing with the ball. Love, her mother had said, I don't think dogs cry, do they? You see, they don't look on death like we do. They live in the moment. Eartha had never understood Magpie's nonchalance towards his best friend, yet right now Eartha believed her children were reacting to their father's death in much the same way that Magpie had reacted to Sylvester. "Your dad is not coming home," would soon likely be followed later in the afternoon by, "Mummy, can I have a cookie and some chocolate milk?" Eartha privately concluded to herself, as she reflected over these many things on the closed toilet seat in the cloakroom, that both animals and young children were so much more resilient about the brutality of death than adults obviously were. She envied her children's optimism as they carried on drawing without a care in the world. Yes, it was interesting for them that Dad had gone to heaven, but life still went on, didn't it? One day Eartha was in no uncertain doubt her two children would want to learn all they could about their late father, although by then she was sure they would barely remember him at all, and that made her feel very, very sad. When she told them about their late father, she'd be able to tell them what a wonderful and brave man he was, for not many a soul would have the stomach to deal with the hardened, brutal criminals that her husband had to face on his squad team on a regular basis. Of course, the squad teams always used the element of surprise to pounce on these predators of our society that preyed on the innocent and most vulnerable. Eartha couldn't help thinking there were aspects of little Benjamin that reminded her of her husband Nate. So even though Nate was now gone, he lived on in his own children. She was sure of that. The feel of the two gold wedding bands hanging side by side each other on the chain brought her a great deal of comfort. It made her think of Nate, and the feelings she felt were incredibly raw. The lugubrious melancholia she felt over his tragic passing was insurmountable, it would seem, but she knew she wasn't alone in her grief. All around the world there were others much like her, going through similar challenges, and her realizing she wasn't completely alone brought her a measure of comfort. Let's just say her husband Nate had been an upstanding member of the police squad team, who had lost his life so tragically in a drug raid that had gone badly awry. The squad team had a formidable reputation at bringing down some notorious criminals and gang members suspected of heinous acts, which included murder and drug trafficking. One day the police squad did a raid in the early hours of the morning on a residence, when all the drug traffickers were fast asleep in bed. They had broken down the front door and woken up the surprised members of the gang. There were 8 of them in the house, whom they had all cuffed, but one appeared to be missing. The squad team did a thorough investigation to search for the 9th drug trafficker and couldn't find him anywhere. They assumed he was not on the premises and believed they had secured the place. This drug trafficker must have been wide awake when the police successfully broke down the front door, or he would never have successfully found the time to hide himself in the closet that had already been checked by the police squad team. But unbeknown to them, there was a hidden compartment in that cupboard that they had failed to see, where the missing man was hiding. In a trice, this drug trafficker, who must have had a suicide wish of sorts, suddenly emerged from the closet rather unexpectedly. With all guns blazing, he had fired out several shots as he tried his best to exit the premises to make his escape. If he'd remained hidden, he'd have easily got away with not being arrested, so why he suddenly burst out of the closet was rather perturbing, to say the least. Some suggested that he possibly panicked. The drug trafficker was blown up at once by the police squad in what seemed like a second. Nate had been wearing body armor at the time, but one of the bullets that had been fired randomly at the squad by this drug trafficker had unfortunately ricocheted and hit Nate square in the femoral artery of his leg. The squad team had done their level best to try and save Nate's life in any way they could, and to stem the dreadful flow of bleeding, but the wound was so bad that Nate had bled out incredibly fast, and no amount of pressure on the wound seemed to help at all, because the bleeding was insistent. Apparently the room where Nate had died had smelt of copper from all the blood that he'd lost. Nate obviously realized in his last moments he absolutely was not going to make it. He had told his friends in the squad team to tell Eartha that he loved her and the children. He had died only minutes later. It was later that morning. 2 members of the squad team that Eartha knew very well arrived at her doorstep. She knew that her husband had only recently done a drug raid, so for them to arrive at her front doorstep was very sobering indeed, and they were there to deliver her the tragic news of her husband's demise.
and all they could say to her is, "I'm very sorry, Eartha. We did everything we could. Your husband was such a good man." Eartha had known on spotting them, as they ambled up to her front door, that they were going to deliver to her the worst kind of news possible. In truth, Nate had always prepared Eartha emotionally for a tragedy like this to happen to him, because he knew it was a distinct possibility, as he was dealing with hardened criminals all the time. He knew he was always putting his life at perilous risk. But Eartha had never allowed herself to entertain such disquieting thoughts until they had all but become a cruel reality in her own life. As Eartha thought about her husband's tragic passing, she watched the rain pouring down in sheets. She knew that her best friend Rona was absolutely right, and that she should heed her salient advice. This was a new beginning for her and her children, and she needed to make her dreams a reality. She wanted to become a full-time potter, and that would never happen if she chose to squander her time with a prevailing sense of doubt. When intrepid climbers ascended Mount Everest, they didn't stop to think, "What if I can't do it? What if this happens or that happens?" Instead, they courageously, boldly took on the perilous weather conditions and the dangerous, treacherous hazards in order to achieve their goals. And if they could do it with scant regard towards their fear, then she could climb her own little Mount Everest. She just needed a little faith, that was all. The rain kept coming down in dogs and cats. In this breakthrough moment, Eartha decided that yes, this would indeed be a new beginning for the kids and herself. It had been an easy decision to leave their apartment in New York behind, and all the places and people that reminded her of her loss. Coming here to live in a lovely red-brick Georgian-style house close to the town of Newfield in Tompkins County, with its small population of people, really was like beginning again. She had started to make friends here, and that was a promising start. Her children were also making friends. She had been warmly welcomed into the small community, who sensed she was a woman on her own, that had been through a few storms. These caring people hadn't even asked her too many invasive questions, possibly realizing she wasn't ready to share yet, as to why she'd moved away from the bustle of New York. She had been invited to barbecues and get-togethers, and even made to feel as if she'd always belonged here, and she was glad she'd come to live in this part of the world. 2 of the locals had asked her for pottery lessons, and she had thought she might enjoy teaching people how to work behind a wheel with a ball of clay. When she had first laid eyes on the red-brick farmhouse and the barn that she had converted into a pottery studio, moving here had seemed like the right thing to do, almost as if Nate himself was guiding her to do this. She realized that working in a pottery studio, overlooking the idyllic views of the woodgrove, would certainly inspire her creativity. This was the quintessential opportunity she'd been waiting for all her life, to create pottery that she could sell, and she could make a good living out of it for herself. And with her newfound financial freedom, she could really enjoy pursuing this passion of hers. So acquiring a nanny to move in to help with taking care of her children was something she needed to do. "I can do this," she told herself, as she watched the small mustard-coloured Peugeot roll up the driveway, while the rain continued to bucket down. She crinkled up her eyes to see if she could observe the person seated in the front seat of the car, which she assumed must be the first nanny applying for the job. It was probably Bertha Ferris, and she'd be seeing more applicants today. It was a promising start, because Bertha Ferris was 5 minutes early, and promptness was always important. The day had turned out not quite as badly as she had expected, and all the nannies she had interviewed for the position had been completely different and as varied as the colours and flavours you would find in a packet of jelly beans. Bertha Ferris had arrived at the door very promptly, sporting a big black umbrella. She was a girl that had come highly recommended by the agency. She looked as if she was nothing more than 18 years old, rather than her 28 years of age. But when she checked Bertha's papers, they affirmed very clearly that this young lady, who looked as if she should be in senior high, was indeed 28.
"So tell me about yourself," Eartha had asked the young lady. "If you don't mind my saying so. I hope I don't sound desperately rude, but you look so much younger than your 28 years. I thought you were only about 18.
Bertha looked awkward and slightly embarrassed. Her skin began to pinken. She sat there on the sofa, her back as erect as a pencil, and her big brown eyes nervously glancing around the living room, almost as if she half expected something to jump out of the shadows and scare the bejesus out of her. Even in this interview, she looked rather like a deer caught in headlights, but maybe she was just a tad nervous, Eartha thought. "That's what everybody says," said Bertha. "If I go to a bar, sometimes I have to prove my age. It's terribly embarrassing, you know, because nobody ever believes I'm 28. It drives me mad." Eartha studied Bertha's curriculum vitae for a moment, while everything remained silent in the living room. Finally she looked up from the paper. "I see you've been a nanny for 2 other families. They both appear to have given you glowing references, which is a very good sign. It would seem you come highly recommended. Why did you leave your previous employments, if you don't mind my asking?" "Well, the first job I worked for was with a very nice couple called the Wallaces. They were amazing. They had 3 children, but they moved. You see, the father got a transfer to a job in Vancouver, and I didn't want to move that far away from New York. So I decided not to go with them. I was fond of the children, of course, and they were a great family to work for. I really enjoyed working for them. They were very good people. They made me feel as if I belonged with their family. I looked after a 3-year-old girl called Annie, a little boy called Robert, and another boy called Ferren, and they were such well-behaved kids. It was a pleasure to look after them." "I see. And what about this other, more recent nanny job you acquired? Why did you leave that, if you don't mind my asking?" "Well, I did enjoy working for the Robinson family, but when I got the job it was under the understanding that I got the weekends off, but they kept reneging on their word by insisting I worked every weekend, so I never got any time off, and that really bothered me. I'd be told I could go off on a Saturday and Sunday, and then Mrs. Robinson would suddenly change her mind at the very last minute and say she needed me, and could I please stay. She'd tell me she wouldn't mess me around again, but then she did, over and over again. She was very presumptuous, hot-tempered and extremely manipulative. It was very difficult to refuse her. She was a defence attorney, you see. She was a demanding woman by nature, and always made me feel as if I was in the wrong if I wanted time off. She would say to me, "Can't you see I'm so busy? I've got so much on my plate. Are you really going to expect me to look after my children when I pay you so well?" She didn't seem to know the meaning of the word no, I'm afraid. She took advantage of me because I'm by nature quite shy. I've always been a bit of a people-pleaser, you see. In the end, I would work every single weekend, and it all got too much for me. So I made up an excuse as why I had to leave for good, so that she'd give me an excellent reference, which she did. I didn't want to rub the woman up the wrong way, because let's just say if you make an enemy out of Mrs. Robinson, she'd probably ruin you for life. She had lots of friends in high places. It became extremely awkward for me, so that's why I gave in my notice. I just had to have some time for myself. "Of course you need time for yourself. Everybody does. It sounds as if this dreadful woman took advantage of you, and that is not good. That won't happen with me, I can assure you of that. You will get your weekends." "Well, I guess it happens," said Bertha, shaking her head sadly. "I liked her kids very much. They were sweet, but the parents, well, they were both professionals, and everything seemed to revolve around them. They had no time for their children. They were the kind of couple you wonder why they had children in the first place. I'm not the only nanny that has been exploited like this, I suppose, and I won't be the last. I've heard lots of stories, you know, but I care not to repeat them. I know people worry about who they hire as a nanny, but from a nanny's perspective, the type of people you work for is equally as significant. If you must know, my agency contacted me about this job that you're offering. They said they'd interviewed you, and that you seemed a very nice person. And they also told me I'd get the weekends off, and that means a whole lot to me. It's important for me to see friends and family. That's all." "Of course it's important," Eartha agreed. "So tell me, Bertha, why did you decide to become a nanny in the first place?" "Because I love children. I love looking after kids. It's all I've ever wanted to do all my life, since I was very little.
In truth, I guess I'm a big kid myself. I love to play games with children, and I enjoy looking after them. But in the same breath, I am very reliable, and I can be trusted to handle the most rambunctious and testy of children. Well, I'm glad to hear that, Bertha, because I do need someone reliable and extremely trustworthy for this nanny position, as you can appreciate. The nanny I hire will be required to look after my children and transport them to extracurricular activities during the day. I'm looking for someone to move in with us. I have a spare bedroom en suite for the lady who acquires the job, but I need them to be around during the week to manage my children's needs. I won't be leaving the premises unless I'm going to town for shopping or meeting up with a friend, so if you need anything, I will be working in my pottery studio on the property. I'm sure you saw the barn that overlooks the trees. I've converted that into a pottery studio. I will be working from there. You're a potter? That's right, I am. I've been doing pottery since I was 13 years old. My father introduced me to the craft, and I never looked back. Wow, that's absolutely amazing! Your husband, where is he? Asked Bertha, her eyes looking directly into Eartha's. Is he also going to be working on the property? Or does he work away from the house? I don't have a husband any more, said Eartha coyly, beginning to fiddle with the rings around her neck. He died, I'm afraid, over a year ago in a tragic accident. I prefer not to talk about it if you don't mind. But of course, I'm so sorry. Oh, don't be. It's important you know these things about me. You can see why I need to find the right person for this job as a single mother. I can't pursue my pottery career without the extra help. But of course, Mrs. Mackison. Would you like to see the children? Asked Eartha. They're playing in the nursery together. Of course, I'd love to see them, said Bertha eagerly. After all, if you hire me, they'll be my full-time responsibility during the week, while you're working in your studio. Eartha had been extremely impressed with the way Bertha had interacted with her children, who seemed to have liked her at once and invited her to play with them. I want to show you my dollies, Bertha, Christy had said proudly, leading Bertha by the hand to show her her vast collection of dolls. They're so lovely. I love playing with dolls, she had said to a delighted Christy. Moments later, Bertha was sitting down with Benjamin, playing with his toy train, and getting quite animated about it, almost as if she forgot that Eartha was even there. And in that quintessential moment, as shy and as fresh-faced as Bertha may appear, as far as Eartha was concerned, this young woman ticked the right boxes for the job, and Eartha knew at once that she was the one. Of course she had to interview the other applicants before she made any final decisions. The second applicant was a woman called Mrs. Rosamond, and she was in her early 60s, was reasonably stout. She wore an old-fashioned tweed skirt and jacket, had never been married a day in her life, and had a no-nonsense disposition. Don't you worry, Mrs. Mackison. Those kids of yours will be taught real manners with me in charge. I don't stand for any nonsense. These days kids are not raised right at all. The parents let them get away with everything, I find. But don't you worry, Mrs. Mackison. The children under my charge will be seen and not heard, if you know what I mean, she said rather proudly. Eartha didn't know what the woman meant, and didn't want to either. She could sense that Mrs. Rosamond would be a tough taskmaster who'd stand for no nonsense, and while some parents might like that, Eartha wanted to hire someone her children would actually like. The last thing she wanted for her children was to be miserable in the company of their nanny. All the other applicants she interviewed had quirky characteristics. One arrived for the interview, sporting a bright pink hairstyle. She was wearing a tartan mini skirt, dark black fishnet stockings, black lipstick on her lips, and high-heeled combat boots. She seemed nice enough, but judging by the way she presented herself, Eartha was not entirely sure she could trust this girl. She seemed a little on the flaky side, and spent half the interview looking down at her cell phone to check her messages, which seemed rather inappropriate. In the end, it was an easy choice for Eartha to make, so she was delighted to offer Bertha the job. Within a short space of time, Bertha had settled in with the family rather seamlessly, and Eartha wondered to herself what all the fuss had been about. Why had she been so desperately worried about recruiting a nanny?
Bertha had been such a godsend. She was incredibly good with the children. She had a youthful energy, and these days she seemed to have come out of her shell a little. Eartha had been met with a cacophony of I told you so's from Rona, but she didn't care a jot about that. She was delighted that things were working out well with the new nanny.
"Didn't I say," Rona boasted, "that you'd find the perfect person to look after the kids? Am I right or am I right, Eartha? You don't need to gloat, Rona. It just doesn't suit you." "Oh, but I do. Let's hear it from you." "All right, I admit it. You were right, Rona. I'm very pleased with the new nanny. She seems terribly nice. She's very young looking for her age, but she came with glowing references, and so far I'm very happy with her. And the kids appear to like her too." "Well, if the kids like her, it's a flying start, is it not?" "Of course it is. But it's early days, is it not? But I do feel as if a great big weight has been lifted off my mind." "Of course you do. You needed all the help you could get, and now you have it. And by the sounds of things you've found someone you can trust. So it doesn't get better than that." "Well, I must admit, it is lovely just to focus on my pottery, without worrying about the children."
Bertha was thoroughly enjoying her job working for Mrs. Eartha Mackison and looking after her two lovely children. She was glad she'd found a nanny position, where she was guaranteed the weekends off. What she hadn't revealed to Eartha was that her mother back home in Queens was actually dying of cancer, and was being looked after devotedly by her father, along with a couple of nurses. She had wanted to help her father by being there for him full-time, in supervising her mother's every need. But her father had told her in no uncertain terms that it wasn't good nor healthy for her to be cooped up in their house day after day, in such a depressing environment.
"Bertha, sweetheart," he had told her, "you're an independent young lady in your own right. What on earth are you doing hanging around this house the whole time, attending to your mother's every need, when you should be out there, making a life for yourself? I certainly don't expect you to drop everything to look after your mother, when I've got it all sorted. We've got nurses to do that for us. You love being a nanny, so why don't you find yourself a good position as a nanny somewhere? And maybe they can give you the odd weekend off, so you can come home very often and see us. Your mother most certainly doesn't want you to spend your time looking after her. That is the last thing she would want for you. As I keep saying, she's got nurses doing that for her, and I'm here for her all the time. Your mother would be absolutely devastated if she thought she was keeping you from pursuing your dreams, and I'm afraid I agree with her on this one."
"But what if Mum was to die suddenly, when I'm not around? What then? You often hear about that happening."
"Don't you worry your pretty little head about stuff like that. It isn't significant. People die when they die, and very often their loved ones aren't even in the room when that happens. People die on their own terms, in the manner that they see fit. The nurse was informing me about this only the other day. There isn't a jot you can do about it. Besides, if I know your mother, the moment I go off to get myself a coffee in the kitchen will be when she breathes her last. That would be so typical of your mother."
"You really think so?"
"I'm afraid I do. It's just a feeling I have. But getting back to my very important point, your mother wouldn't be remotely happy if you were hanging around the house all the time, waiting to bid her farewell before she dies. The nurse informed me that there is a dying process, and you can be pretty sure when the person is about to pop their clogs. So I will be able to notify you about your mother's condition, so you can come here at once. You love working with kids, don't you? Do yourself a big favour, love, and go and find that perfect nanny job for yourself, but preferably not with someone who will exploit you like the Robinsons so obviously did. You can't ever work for such entitled people like that again. When you find the right family, and if they like you in return and offer you the position, my advice to you is to snap it up at once."
Bertha was a treasure by nature, and she was shy and unassuming. When she looked at her reflection in the mirror, it annoyed her a great deal, because she looked so young, as if she was still in senior high. She would have not looked out of place wearing a school uniform for sure. She had tried everything to look older, by appearing more sophisticated, with fashionable haircuts and a touch of lipstick on her lips, but that had done little to make her look more mature. On the contrary, when she did apply makeup on her face, it made her look like a clown. Ostensibly, every time she had applied for a position as a nanny, people had always questioned her about her age, as if they were secretly suspicious she was pretending to be older than she actually was, which was far from the truth, of course. Ostensibly, in the last 2 nanny positions she had occupied, she had become an indispensable asset to those families, who recognised that they don't make nannies quite as reliable as Bertha. Indeed, so upset were the Wallaces about losing her, when they moved to Vancouver, that they had practically begged her to move in with the family. But that was during the tumultuous time when Bertha's mother had been diagnosed with cancer, so going too far away from home was not a conceivable option for her. She needed to be there for her parents and to support her father. Bertha had genuinely warmed to Mrs. Mackison from the moment she laid eyes on the kind woman, and she knew at once that she would enjoy working for her. She guessed Mrs. Mackison was in her late 30s, maybe even early 40s. She had such a gentle manner about her that was as graceful as a gazelle, and she had long, generous artistic fingers that Bertha guessed were the invaluable tools that Mrs. Mackison used for her artistic creations. Indeed, she had been incredibly impressed and in awe of some of the pottery around the house that Eartha had skillfully made, and wasn't surprised that Eartha wanted to make pottery as a full-time business, for she was indeed a skilled artist. Eartha Mackison had insisted Bertha call her Eartha. It was quite uncanny, really, how both of their names ended with the same ringtone, so to speak. Bertha felt sorry for Mrs. Mackison, because from their first interview she had seen the lugubrious sadness in the woman's eyes. She knew that Mrs. Mackison was grieving the tragic loss of her late husband, and her emotions were obviously still very raw. Bertha could easily relate to her pain, knowing full well that her mother was dying, and that was something that never left her thoughts 24/7. She and her mother had been incredibly close, but these days, very sadly, her mother had become like an empty shell. Although there were memorable, indelible moments when she could see flashes of her mother coming back, when she would suddenly seem to come out of her deep sleep, in which she was so much entrenched these days, as her body began to slowly but surely shut down, as it prepared to make its exit from this earth. Bertha's mother, Charlene, had been incredibly stoic from the very moment she'd learnt she had cancer, when Dr. Lamore told her her rather unfortunate prognosis, after she'd been given an endoscopic biopsy. She had said quite matter-of-factly, "Oh dear, Dr. Lamore, do you know what? I really had a feeling you were going to tell me that it was the big C. Turns out I was right. I had a feeling about it all along, a prognostic feeling, you could say." She said this so casually that Bertha had been taken aback, as she was seated next to her mother when her mother received this diagnosis. Dr. Lamore appeared relieved, rather bewildered and surprised at the same time that he had such a stolid patient. There was no doubt for Bertha that her mother's stunning revelations of clandestinely suspecting she had cancer all along had come as quite the shocker that she had been ill prepared for. She had mistakenly presumed that her mother Charlene was going to get the results to a routine endoscopic biopsy, after complaining about some debilitating cramp-like pains in her stomach, blood in her stools, unexplained weight loss, and a feeling of perpetual exhaustion all the time that seemed to consume her day in and day out. Bertha had mistakenly thought her mother was just badly run down after experiencing a very bad bout of flu earlier on in the year, and she thought her mother had a nasty case of hemorrhoids. But to learn that her mother had an aggressive form of colon cancer had been absolutely devastating, and for a long time Bertha had been in absolute denial about her mother's perilous condition, refusing to believe that her mother was actually going to die, until her eyes could not deceive her any longer, when her mother's ghost-like fragility revealed all too clearly that she wasn't going to be around for very much longer. When Bertha realized she was losing her mother, it had been a bitter pill for her to swallow. The tragic part of it all was that Charlene Ferris had not been given long to live, unless of course she embarked along the road of chemotherapy, which she had point-blank refused. She wanted to focus on quality of life rather than quantity of days, which was perfectly understandable in the circumstances. It would seem for Bertha, moving in with the Mackesons had been a huge relief for her. It meant she could focus on the Mackeson children and not worry about her mother all the time. When she was caught up in the grief of her own despair, time always seemed to stand still, almost as if the hands of the clock would obstinately refuse to move forward. But when she was busying herself with the Mackeson children, time flew by at the speed of light, and being around the two adorable children had brought a smile on her face for the first time in many months. She realized her father was right. Taking this nanny position had been a big morale booster for her. She didn't feel so deflated about life anymore, and it brought her an incongruous sense of comfort to know that her family was not alone in its problems, and that other families like the Mackesons had been through stuff too. She knew all too well the Mackesons had weathered some very grievous storms, especially in losing the head of their household, and yet despite everything, they were magnificently holding their lives together. It gave her some hope that when her mother did pass away, that maybe she too could take the reins of the horse and trot along steadily with her life, without allowing the potholes in the road to trip her up or drag her down. Of course she didn't like to think of a life without her mother, but it was inevitable that her mother would not be around for very much longer, and thinking about this brought a dreadful lump to her throat. Moving in with the Mackesons into their beautiful red brick Georgian-style house, in such an idyllic part of the world, close to a small town with a small populace, had been a seamless transition for her, and seemingly after a few weeks she began to fit into the family so well that she rarely felt as if she belonged. And working for the Mackesons was like working for the Wallaces. They were a lovely family, and the two young children in her charge were a credit to Eartha, so she was very glad she'd got this job. When Bertha asked the two children about their late father, Christy had pointed to the ceiling. "Our daddy is up in heaven. He's there with the angels," she told Eartha proudly. "He looks down on us all the time, doesn't he, Benjamin?" Benjamin had nodded. "He likes it there so much because they have streams of chocolate that you can drink, like in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory." "Don't they?" she asked her brother again, who once again nodded and said, "Yes, there's lots of chocolate in heaven, lots and lots of it, and plenty of candies as well. As much as you can ever eat. You can pick it all off the trees in heaven. They only have nice things to eat there. They don't have to eat Brussels sprouts, cabbage or spinach like you do in this world. The roads in heaven are paved with lots and lots of gold, and the pearly gates are guarded by very big angels. There is also a window in heaven, and Daddy watches us from the window there all the time." "It sounds to me as if your father's having a great time in heaven. It must be a lovely place," Bertha had said, smiling. "I can't imagine what it must be like to be able to drink chocolate from a stream whenever you like." "Well, it's got to be very nice, hasn't it?" said Christy reflectively. Bertha was impressed at how resilient the two Mackeson kids were over the tragic fortuitous passing of their father, and secretly hoped that some of their resilience would rub off on her when her mother ultimately died. One day, after Bertha had dropped off the two Mackeson kids in Mrs. Mackeson's Mercedes to an art lesson for about a 4-hour stint, she had returned back to the Mackeson house, deciding that she would do a little cleaning while the kids were away. She had been told very clearly not to disturb Mrs. Mackeson, who was busy in her pottery studio working on a very important project. She had been recruited to make 12 very large plant pots for the terrace of the Kello Markham Company. The CEO of the company, a man called Clinton Monivey, had apparently seen some of her excellent exhibits that she had posted online, and had quickly made an order with her. She had promised to have the pots finished in record time. "Bertha, it is very, very important I get this order out.
I'm going to be very, very busy this morning, and I would appreciate not being disturbed unless it's a very important emergency. I just need to get this done. Do you understand?
Absolutely, Mrs. Mackison. I won't disturb you, I promise. It was as Bertha was busying herself around the kitchen, sponging down the granite surfaces, that she heard a car rolling down the drive. She peered out of the kitchen window to see a white SUV. The car ground to a stop, and moments later a woman wearing tight pink trousers, a white well-fitting blouse and a slim white belt, along with a pair of white sneakers, climbed out of the car. She walked over to the trunk of the car and began to pull out of it a whopping huge suitcase on wheels that she began to drag to the front door.
Who the hell is that? Bertha wondered. She knew that Mrs. Mackison was definitely not expecting any visitors today. So what was the stranger doing on their property? And why was she carrying such a massive suitcase that gave her the impression that this impromptu visitor intended to stay a long time? Before the woman got the chance to ring the doorbell, Bertha had promptly answered it. "Hello," she said, staring up at the curious stranger, who had long blonde hair swept away from her face and blue eyes that were red and puffy, which immediately suggested that the woman in question was very upset about something and in quite the state. "Sorry, can I help you?" Bertha asked, not knowing exactly what else to say. "I'm looking for Eartha. Where is she?" said the woman impatiently. "I need to see her now. I need to see her right away. I've been phoning her all morning, and she hasn't answered her cell phone. Why hasn't she answered her phone? Where is she?" "I'm so sorry, but she's been in the pottery studio all morning. She's asked me specifically, that she's not disturbed today, unless, of course, it's an emergency. She's doing a big project for a major company that have ordered 12 very large plant pots from her for their outside terrace, I believe." "Oh, of course. No wonder I couldn't get in touch with her. Silly me," said the woman. "My calls kept going to voicemail. I'm Rona, by the way. I'm Eartha's best friend. And if you're wondering about the heavy suitcase, well, yes, you're right. I've invited myself to move in for a while. I know that's a bit impertinent, but I promise you, I know Eartha's not going to mind. I would appreciate it if you let me in. You must be Bertha, the nanny I've heard a lot about. You look a lot younger than your age. That is rather surprising. Eartha told me you did, but now I see what she means." "That's what everybody says when they meet me," said Bertha. "But I am older than I look. I'm 28, going on 29. You'd better come in, Rona." Rona gingerly followed Bertha into the house. "I hope you don't mind if I go and dump the suitcase in the spare room. I know Eartha won't mind me staying, as I keep saying. We're like sisters, you see. I would really appreciate it if you made me a cup of hot tea with lots and lots of sugar in it. I'm really going to need it. I've had the kind of morning that you would not wish on your worst enemy. I've quite literally been to hell and back, and I'm not joking either." "That sounds ominous," said Bertha. "I'll go and put the kettle on right away then." Moments later, Rona appeared in the kitchen, looking ever so slightly flustered. She sighed as she sat down at the breakfast nook, and gratefully took the hot cup of tea that Bertha presented her. Rona took a sip of the warm sweet liquid, and sighed. "Oh, that is so good. Thank you so much. Just what I needed. And you do make an excellent cup of tea. Is everything all right with you?" asked Bertha, sensing that Rona was going through some inward turmoil, for she had seen that hopeless hangdog look on her father's face often enough, especially after her mother's diagnosis with cancer, and she knew instinctively when someone was in a bad way. And if the truth be told, Rona looked like she'd been mown down by a forklift truck. "No, everything's not fine, I'm afraid," said Rona. "Everything couldn't be more wrong. But that's the story of my lousy life. Everything goes pear-shaped with me. It's always been that way." "What happened?" asked Bertha. "Maybe I could help. I'm a very good listener. It might help to talk about it, whatever it is. You know what they say, a trouble shared is a trouble halved. I do believe that." "Very well. If you put it like that, I might as well tell you what happened," said Rona. "It'll be good to get off my chest. If you must know, this morning I discovered that my husband Nick is been having an affair with another woman. I don't know who the cow is, but I hate women like her who wilfully cheat with married men." "So do I," agreed Bertha. "Those women know exactly what they're doing. They have no shame, do they?" Rona blew her nose in a tissue and sniffed. "When I married Nick, he swore blind he was incapable of cheating on me. But now I know differently. And to say I'm heartbroken is a euphemism. I feel as if my whole world has come crashing down on my head, which is why I came here. I needed to confide in Eartha. She's the only person I turn to every time my life is in shreds, which happens to me more often than I care to admit." "I'm so sorry," said Bertha sympathetically, not knowing exactly how to comfort this very distraught woman, who was clearly trying to fight back tears. "I don't know what to say. That's awful. How did you find out exactly?" "Well, I've been very suspicious for a while," Rona admitted. "I've been married to Nick for 2 years. I falsely assumed he was the man of my dreams. Can you believe that? I'd been duped again. All my life I've picked men who were serial cheaters, but I thought Nick was different until... "Until what?" asked Bertha, sliding into the breakfast nook seat to sit directly opposite Rona, who by the sounds of things had had an unenviable morning. Rona seemed appreciative to be able to share her troubles with Bertha, even though she'd only just met the nanny. But there was something so warm about Bertha that Rona found herself opening up to her very easily. She knew she needed to tell someone about the hell she'd been through over the last few hours, and as it couldn't be Eartha, who was now preoccupied with doing an important order for a client in her pottery studio, it may as well be this very nice young lady. She had had a good cry, but she was now feeling rather numb, because everything seemed so surreal to her, and yet at the same time it was so familiar, rather like Groundhog Day being repeated in her life over again. Why was it that every single man she ever met was hell-bent on faithlessly doing the dirty on her? It just wasn't fair. She rarely had falsely believed that Nick was different from the other men she had dated in the past, but this morning she discovered the gut-wrenching truth about Nick, and she realized she was married to a prize cad. Rona stared at her mug rather wistfully, and looked up at Bertha with hurt in her eyes that was so tangible that Bertha almost had to look away. Rona then spoke, breaking the silence with her words. "They say women have instincts about when they're being cheated on, don't they?" "I think they do," Bertha admitted. Rona nodded and said, "Let's just say I sensed something was up with Nick. About 3 weeks ago, actually, because he was behaving differently. He was pulling away from me when he returned home, late every night, and there was always one excuse after another as why he couldn't return home early. I noticed he was not being affectionate towards me, like greeting me with a warm kiss and telling me he loved me, like he always used to. All those endearing gestures just faded away, and I knew that wasn't right. I knew something was up. I told Eartha as much a few weeks ago. She thought I was just being paranoid. Needless to say, I went through all Nick's stuff, all through his pockets and things, even his cell phone, and I could find no incriminating evidence whatsoever to support my theory that he was actually committing infidelity. Until, of course, last night." For a moment Rona said nothing, as she stared rather awkwardly into space, while her fingers glided up and down the warm mug of tea in a self-soothing gesture. "Last night you found something?" asked Bertha, raising a questioning brow. "What exactly did you find?" "Well, I did in a manner of speaking. It was enough to get me very suspicious. You see, my husband Nick told me he was going to Hawaii for 5 days on a business trip. I've never known my husband to go to a place like Hawaii on business, so that got my attention. My husband happens to love Hawaii. He went there with his family for holidays and recreation as a child. So when he said he was going to Hawaii, I felt a lump in my throat. I really did." "Does he go away often?" Bertha asked. "On business, I mean." "Yes, he does, actually. But you need to understand something about my husband. He's one of those people that doesn't pay attention to his wardrobe. I'm the one that buys all his clothes for him to keep him fashionable. But let me tell you, when I looked into his packed suitcase last night and saw all the things he was taking to Hawaii, that was when I discovered he had bought himself brand new designer underwear, fancy swimming trunks and shirts. But more incriminating than that was I found a lone packet of condoms in his wash bag. I thought maybe the condoms had always been there and were once used a long time ago when I wasn't taking the pill. I couldn't be sure. I thought maybe they'd always been there in the wash bag and he'd failed to remove them for some reason. That's why I didn't want to randomly accuse him of anything, just in case I was wrong. Oh my goodness, said Bertha. That is incriminating. Why would he need those for a business trip away from his wife? I hope you confronted him about this. Absolutely not. As I said, I could have overlooked those condoms. He could have just left them in his wash bag and had them a long time ago. And I didn't want to accuse him of something that was an innocent mistake. So what did you do then? Asked Bertha. I waited until Nick left the house this morning. And, of course, I followed him to the airport. I wanted to see what the hell he was getting up to. I smelt a rat, I really did. You followed him to the airport? Asked Bertha, looking impressed. I sure did. And when I got to the airport, I didn't let him out of my sight for a single second. And that was when I saw her. As you can expect, she was tall, skinny, blonde, and pretty. And she ran up to my husband, threw her arms around him, and they kissed passionately. I was near enough to hear him tell her how much he loved her, and how he'd got away from the battle axe of a wife, and how stupid his wife was, because she didn't suspect a thing. Hearing him say this, I couldn't believe it. I mean, it was like having a knife being stabbed through my heart. I couldn't believe he called me a battle axe. Can you believe that? No, I can't. I can't believe he'd describe his wife like that. You certainly don't look like a battle axe to me. So you're saying your husband and this blonde girl never actually saw you at the airport? Not a chance. They were so caught up in their own little world. Nick had no idea I'd seen them both. That is so awful. I'm so sorry. It sure was awful, Rona agreed. I watched them together, line up for the flight they were taking to Hawaii. Do you know what? I was so tempted to run up to him, hit him over the head with a baseball bat, had I had one on my person, and scream like a banshee so that everybody would be looking at us, like they do on that cheetahs program on television. But you know what? I've got more dignity than that. I wasn't going to ignoramusly demean myself. I went back to my car, bawling my eyes out. If you must know, I got some funny looks from people in the parking lot, but I didn't care a jot about that. I've been through all of this before, and it never gets any easier, let me tell you. All of a sudden, Rona burst into tears. I can't believe this is happening to me, she wailed. It's not fair, is it? Why? Why do I always attract losers? What on earth is wrong with me? Nothing is wrong with you, said Bertha, putting a comforting hand on Rona. You've just married a loser, that's all. Your only crime is falling in love with the wrong man, and you're not alone in that. So many of us have done that. I can go and get Eartha if you like from the pottery studio. I'm sure she would consider this an emergency situation. Her best friend, I mean, being cheated on, like this. I'm sure she'd want to comfort you herself. That's not necessary, said Rona, blowing her nose furiously into a tissue and dabbing her wet eyes. I don't want to interrupt my best friend when she's focusing on such an important project. That's the last thing I want to do right now. That wouldn't be fair. You know what? I need some fresh air and exercise. I think it'll do me good. I feel like a walk. Eartha tells me she regularly walks in the woods. You wouldn't care to come with me, would you? She asked, looking up at Bertha with a hopeful, almost pleading glint in her eyes. I could really do with a friend right now. I find walking and moving my body helps me cope a lot better emotionally. It's always worked for me somehow. I'd love to come with you, said Bertha eagerly. Let me just go and put on a pair of sneakers. I tell you what, after we've gone for a walk in the woods, how about I take you for ice cream at the parlour in town? They have raspberry ripple and strawberry cheesecake flavours, and they are to die for. The kids love those. Sugar is great for shock, you know. And then after we've had ice cream, you can come with me to pick up Chrissy and Benjamin from the art class they've been to. And you can see some of the paintings they've done. They're awfully good, you know." "I'd love that," Rona said. Moments later the two women sauntered side by side in the wood grove, and Rona was happy to be out in the invigorating fresh air. She really liked the nanny that Eartha had hired. She could really talk to this lovely young woman. It was unfortunate she couldn't get the indelible imagery of her husband Nick out of her head, when he'd thrown his arms around a strange woman at the airport, telling her how much he'd loved her. Rona had left a note for him at their Manhattan apartment, demanding a divorce and telling him that the cat was finally out of the bag, that she'd seen him at the airport with a woman who was clearly more than a friend to him. "I knew you were cheating on me," she wrote in the note. "I saw the condoms in your suitcase, and the woman you met up with at the airport. I heard you telling her you loved her, and how your battle axe of a wife didn't suspect a thing about your relationship with her. Yes, I was watching. I heard everything. I've seen enough, and I'm filing for a divorce." Rona felt as if all the stuffing had been knocked out of her, one too many times. Why couldn't she be shrewd and discerning like Eartha was, when it came to picking good men? The walk through the trees on Eartha's property was spectacular. It really was a glorious spring morning, and the soft, ethereal sunshine sprinkled its cheery light through the trees. It almost seemed impossible in this moment to be sad, as the generous warmth of the natural world powerfully insulated and nurtured the most frayed and fractured of emotions. She and Bertha had been trekking down some trails for quite some time, and then Rona suddenly stopped short in her tracks and pointed to something that was dangling on a tree. "What the hell is that?" she asked curiously. Bertha walked towards the tree branch to examine the thing that was hanging from it, that Rona had pointed out. "How curious," said Bertha, looking genuinely perplexed. "How the hell did that get there?" "It's a pendant of some kind, hanging on a leather thong with an eagle's feather. The pendant looks like it's made of some kind of purple gemstone. It's awfully pretty, don't you think? Well, if you like unorthodox, unconventional jewellery, that is. It's not exactly to my taste, of course. I wonder how the necklace got here, who it belongs to, and what on earth it's doing hanging on this tree branch." "Maybe someone dropped it," Rona suggested, "and someone else found it, and hung it on the tree branch so that whoever dropped it might find it more easily. One of the previous owners, perhaps, that used to live in Eartha's house before she purchased it." "I guess that would make sense," Bertha agreed. "Do you mind dreadfully if I put the necklace on? I'd like to keep it if I may," Rona asked. "I'm rather bohemian. I like quirky things. And the eagle's feather on the thong is so cool. You see, eagles are my favourite birds of prey. They're strong and majestic." Bertha nodded. "Why don't you keep it? I dare say whoever it belonged to is probably long gone by now. So I would keep it if I were you. After all, you're the one that spotted it first, and you know what they say, finders keepers." Bertha helped Rona put on the necklace around her neck, and together they began to sashay energetically down the trail together. Rona suddenly began to laugh, almost as if the weight of the entire world had been lifted off her shoulders, and Bertha was surprised by how upbeat that Rona had suddenly become, when only moments before she had looked lost and subdued. "You seem happy all of a sudden," said Bertha in delight. "You're right. Walking in the woodgrove is doing you the world of good. Who would have thought it?" "It's funny you should say that," said Rona, "because I do feel awfully good. But I assure you it's not because of this walk. I know that. Let's just say, as odd as this may sound to you, once I put the necklace on, it was as if the heaviness on my shoulders was lifted off at once. I feel so light, almost as if I'm floating on a cloud. I've never felt like this before. I feel as if I can conquer the entire world and move on with my life. This is an incongruous feeling, but a reassuring one at the same time. I think this necklace must be a lucky charm of some kind. I'm feeling emotionally less fragile, far more stable and secure than I've ever felt before. I'm not kidding either. I'm usually downcast for months and months after I've been cheated on by a man. But now I'm feeling as if my insurmountable, unassailable problems are just like elementary hurdles that I can easily overcome, that have helped me just grow into a better person. I'm not feeling all melancholic anymore." "Are you joking or are you being serious?" asked Bertha, "because I can't work out what." She was certain that Rona must be calling her bluff. Do I look like I'm winding you up? Asked Rona. After what happened this morning, I'd hardly think I was in a position to crack jokes. I was feeling so piqued with Nick for cheating on me. And guess what? Now I don't even care. All of a sudden, I'm seeing my life through a completely different lens. And instead of admonishing myself for my half-witted mistakes and extremely poor judgments on things, I'm suddenly feeling as if these challenges that I've been facing are now easy to overcome. It's like I have mental clarity and a brand new vision. And it's only happened after I put on that necklace. It's weird that this should happen to me. It's not the walk that has done this. I'm telling you, it's the necklace. How is that even possible? You mean to tell me you believe this necklace is making you feel better? Asked Bertha incredulously. If I was a child and you told me that, I'd believe the necklace was magic. Don't laugh, said Rona. Stranger things have actually happened, you know. In fact, many gemstones have natural healing qualities. Maybe this one helps the wearer to have better emotional clarity or lucidity. It's a possibility, you know. Do you mind, dreadfully, Rona, if I put on the pendant for a moment, to see if it has a similar effect on me? You see, my mother is dying of colon cancer, and I've been going through a lot of turmoil recently. I'd like to give the pendant a try, if I may. Just wear it for a few minutes or so. But of course you can wear it, said Rona sympathetically. I'm sorry, I had no idea about your mother. Eartha never told me she was dying of cancer, because I never told Eartha. She's going through so much lamentable grief of her own, isn't she, over losing her husband? I don't want to dump onto her shoulder my own personal problems. That would not be a kind thing for me to do. Point taken, agreed Rona. Here, let me help you put the necklace on. Rona helped Bertha put on the necklace around her neck, although she was clandestinely very sceptical whether the necklace would have any healing powers at all. As far as she was concerned, she'd never have normally tried on anything that didn't belong to her, especially if it was found lying on a random tree branch in the woods, because she didn't know where it came from. But if a necklace could really remove the weight of hopelessness from her heart that she felt about her mother dying, it was well worth a try, although she seriously doubted it would actually work. She could see there was definitely a bohemian, rather unconventional side to Rona's character. Bertha could imagine Rona going into one of those New Age shops in town, the ones that sell tarot cards, dream catchers, gemstones, and magic spell potions. She suspected some of these things probably had a placebo effect on the buyer. If you really believed a magic potion would attract a brand new love interest in your life, it might actually happen with the power of self-belief. And she wouldn't have been remotely surprised if Rona had done such a thing before. Bertha could visualize in her mind's eye Rona buying a love potion to attract a new love interest in her life. But those kinds of things, she was most sure, were frivolously expensive and would never ever actually work. When Rona had successfully put the leather necklace on Bertha's neck, Bertha very suddenly felt as if her whole body was flooded with warmth, as if waves of warm love had simply seeped into every single cell in her entire body. And then she knew that this really was a special necklace, for she began to laugh, and both women realized that there was something magical about this pendant, as it could so easily shift your emotions. Bertha found herself looking on her mother's declining health in a whole new light, with a similar attitude to the Mackerson kids, Benjamin and Christy. How was this even possible, she wondered. It really was magic. Bertha and Rona both promptly decided that when Eartha returned from the pottery studio later that afternoon, they would persuade her to try on the gemstone necklace. They knew that Eartha had been through so much grief in her own life, and they hoped that in some way the necklace might succeed in removing some of the stains of trauma in her heart, as it appeared to have done for them so successfully. How this was possible they didn't know, nor did they understand, but both women suddenly felt unusually happy, almost as if they'd been injected with a feel-good euphoria that they could not explain. When Eartha returned from the pottery studio, she was rather surprised to find Bertha and her friend Rona giggling in the kitchen like a couple of naughty teenagers that were planning a prank on her. "I saw your car in the driveway, Rona," she said, sounding perturbed. "What on earth are you doing here? I wasn't expecting you. This is a lovely surprise. The two of you seem to be in a very good mood. What's going on?" Is there a joke I need to hear?" "No, there's no joke. I'm just in a great mood," Rona said. "I feel deliriously happy. Just so you know, I've taken 3 weeks off work, and I'm moving in with you for a while." After she said this, she nonchalantly said very casually, "You won't believe it, but Nick's cheated on me. I followed him to the airport. I saw him with another woman." "Is this some kind of a joke?" asked Eartha. "Why are you looking so pleased with yourself about this?" "I can't explain why I feel so upbeat, but genuinely I'm not upset about any of this. I don't even care about Nick's cheating anymore. It is what it is." "Well, maybe you're just not allowing it to sink in because it feels surreal to you," said Eartha kindly. "I'm very, very sorry that Nick has cheated on you. I don't know what to say, Rona. That is absolutely terrible. What a treacherous thing for him to do," she said, taking her friend affectionately into her arms and giving her a warm hug. "It goes without saying you can stay here as long as you like, and I'll give you all the support you need." "Oh, don't worry about me. I'm going to be absolutely fine," said Rona confidently. "He cheated on me, but it's life, isn't it? It's the way of the world. You win some, you lose some, like a squirrel with its acorns. Regretfully, I'm one of those squirrels that has been picking out the wrong acorns for far too long. But the tide's about to change. Next time I find a man, he'll be a keeper, and I am going to find him. I can promise you of that." "I just can't believe you're being so positive. This is not like you," said Eartha, looking rather vexed. "You mean you're surprised I'm not having an absolute meltdown? Is that what you're saying?" "Well, no, I don't mean that exactly." "Of course you mean that. You're right. I should be having a meltdown, but I'm not. I feel surprisingly happy today, elated actually. I can't help the way I feel. I feel as light as a feather, as if I'm floating on air. I feel so great." Eartha could not understand why her best friend Rona was in such a good euphoric mood. After discovering that Nick had cheated on her, people didn't react like this. Her friend's nonchalance and indifference about this cheating seemed less than extraordinary. "I've got a present for you," said Rona excitedly. "I want you to try it on." "What is it?" asked Eartha, suddenly looking rather suspicious. "It's a gift for you," said Rona. "Please put it on, Eartha. It's a necklace." Eartha looked at the leather thong with the strange pendant and eagle's feather and wrinkled up her nose in distaste. "You don't like it?" asked Rona, looking disappointed. "It's not that I don't like it. It's just not my kind of jewellery. I'd normally wear something a lot more conservative. It's a little masculine, don't you think? Something an Indian warrior might wear. It's not exactly delicate or particularly feminine, is it?" "Go on, be a sport, Eartha. Put it on," said Rona insistently. Eartha knew she had to humour her best friend. She didn't like this hideous-looking necklace with the strange eagle's feather and purple pendant. It wasn't exactly to her taste, but her best friend had brought her this gift, and it would be churlish not to put it on. Once Eartha had put the necklace on her neck, she was flooded with warm, very euphoric feelings, and the lugubrious despair that had depressed her life for so long suddenly lifted and floated away. She felt lighter and happier than she had done in a long time. She found herself laughing hysterically and making all kinds of wild jokes, something she hadn't done in an awfully long period of time. But at this point she failed to attribute the dramatic shift in her mood to wearing the unorthodox necklace. That night the woman, in a celebratory, light-hearted and happy mood, stayed up all night, with glasses of Cabernet Sauvignon, bowls of cashew nuts, bowls of ice cream and plenty of chocolate, and they talked late into the night about everything and nothing, while both Chrissy and her brother Benjamin remained blissfully fast asleep in their beds, clueless as to the fun the adults were having while they slept. It was at about 10 past midnight, just before the women were about to turn in for bed, when there came a loud banging sound from the front door, which caused everything to vibrate under the loud clanging noise. The knocking almost took the women completely aback. The three women looked at each other quizzically, wondering who could possibly be at the door at this time of night. Eartha had never received a visitor at such a late hour before. "What on earth?" said Eartha. "You guys better come with me. By the sound of that knock, I don't want to be answering that door alone. If I didn't know any better, I'd say the Grim Reaper was at the door. The three women cautiously ambled over to the door together, while Rona surreptitiously grabbed a fire poker as a defensive weapon in case she should have need of it. Eartha stood up on her tippy toes to peep through the spy hole, so that she could see who might be out there. She could see someone standing there, but they were so ambiguously obscure she couldn't make out who it was. Whoever they were, they had to be exceedingly tall, because she failed to see their head. The person looked to be wearing a big black heavyweight overcoat. It was spring, for goodness sake. The weather was not remotely cold, not enough to warrant wearing such warm clothes. After peeping through the hole, she whispered to her friends, "I can see a figure. I think it's a very big, tall man, wearing a winter coat, would you believe? I can't even see his head. What do you think I should do?" "Find out who it is before you open the door," Bertha suggested. "There's no car parked in the driveway, so you can't be sure who our visitor is. You can't be too careful these days, can you?" "Hello there," Eartha called out. "Who is it?" She heard a strange voice that responded to her in kind, but as to what they were saying, she couldn't be sure. It certainly didn't sound like they were speaking in English, but the man had a booming voice that seemed to demand respect. Eartha looked from Rona to Bertha and shrugged her shoulders. "Should I answer it?" she asked them. "Open it," said Rona. "I've got the fire poker at the ready. I'll use it if I need to." Eartha gingerly, rather cautiously opened the front door, and there, standing in the doorway, was a Bigfoot that was easily over 8 foot tall, possibly more. He was robustly built, enormous in every sense of the word, so much so that all three women stared at the creature with gog eyes, wondering if they were actually seeing right. There was an expression of expectation on the Bigfoot's face, as if his visit was purposeful. What could this Bigfoot possibly want with them? They were supposed to be creatures that were rumoured to exist in North America, but such fictitious presumptions were the offerings of idle speculation. But there was no doubt that the creature standing before them was very much alive and incredibly real. Eartha was to say later that standing next to this incredible hulk of a Bigfoot suddenly made her feel small, vulnerable, and inconspicuous. The Bigfoot was looking down at them from a great height, almost as if he was a giant, and that they were all midgets. Eartha had never seen anything so heftily built, so robustly strong, so solid before, like a durable piece of farming machinery that never breaks down. The woman would have been terrified of the Bigfoot had they not been caught off guard, and been so ill prepared for such an unlikely rendezvous. Eartha remembered looking directly into the Bigfoot's eyes, and when she saw kindness in their depths, she said any form of fear she might have harnessed just seemed to dissipate, rather like the condensation on a bathroom mirror. The Bigfoot finally spoke, and the cadence of his voice was very deep, but he spoke in a curious language that none of the women could understand. But then, as if by magic, rather like an instantaneous translation app you get on your computer, Eartha suddenly understood everything of what the creature was saying. "Manita kina, ha silavani kali, hom pasikasilono, ha shikaswani." "I understand you've got something of mine," said the Bigfoot, pointing to the necklace around Eartha's neck. "Katilapana, ha sikwasina." "That is mine," he said. "I'd like it back." Eartha glanced down at the unorthodox necklace she was wearing, and looked up at the Bigfoot rather confounded. "Is this yours?" she asked. The Bigfoot nodded. "But of course you must have it back," she said, removing the necklace from around her neck and handing it over to the Bigfoot. "I'm very sorry, I must apologize. I wouldn't have worn it had I known it was yours." The Bigfoot glanced down at the necklace he was holding in his sausage-sized fingers, and then he glanced at all three women, one by one. "Kolanotola, maki sakwanisa, hashala konolona, hilani kwa." "You shouldn't take things you see that don't belong to you. Not all things you bring to your home are good. But this necklace is very different. It brings much light to the wearer. But if you see it in the woods again, hanging on a branch, I would appreciate it if you would leave it be." "But of course," said Eartha. "I apologize in the first place that it was taken." "Kantolo kosalaki, ham shan suikansi." "No need to apologize," said the Bigfoot. And then he turned around and was gone. But Rona, Eartha, and Bertha all swore that after wearing that extraordinary necklace for only a few minutes, their lives and attitudes changed completely. Rona met and fell in love with a man who treated her like a princess. Eartha also remarried, and her pottery studio became a thriving success. When it came to Bertha, her mother did sadly die of cancer soon after this event. But Bertha coped with her death so stoically, attributing the lightness to her spirit and the resilience she experienced after her mother's passing to the necklace she had worn for all but a few minutes. What the necklace was still remains a mystery to this day. But one thing for sure is that that necklace healed all three women. Eartha claimed she did see the Bigfoot one day when he passed her pottery studio and looked in on her, and then he nodded and was gone. So she knows he's out there somewhere. And what he uses that idiosyncratic necklace for is anybody's guess. So there you are. That's my story.
Well, hello there. I hope you enjoyed the Omnibus edition. We've got many more coming our way for you to listen to. Sending you love wherever you are in the world, in North America, Canada, Kenya, wherever you may be. I send you lots and lots of love. Thank you for listening to my Omnibus, and I really do hope you enjoyed it, because that's the whole idea about it, is to give you some interesting stories to listen to. So until next time, goodbye and good night.